thought that one of the world's best professional speakers was once a physiotherapist? Amanda Gore is a CSP and one of only 2 non-Americans to be inducted into the CPAE Speakers Hall of Fame. Today, Amanda shares her story on how she became from physiotherapist to one of the top speakers in the world. Today we're here speaking with professional speaker Amanda Gore. She's a CSP and one of only 2 CPAEs outside of America. Amanda, thank you so much for speaking with us today.
You're welcome, Tara. Thanks for asking me.
Amanda, you've been a professional speaker for about 25 years. Can you tell me a little bit about why you got into that?
Well, by default, really. I mean, I was a physio. And I started,
wow, really?
Yeah, started as a physio, and I loved physiotherapy. I didn't want to be anything except a physio. It was my life purpose, being a physio. But as a physio, I would teach people all the time. So I didn't just treat them, I would teach them. And then it got a bit hard on my body because I was a manual therapist type person too.
Yeah.
And I got into ergonomics and occupational health, and I started working with Australia Post, and I started teaching with university professors and on stress. And then somebody asked, I'd co-written a book with David Tasker, another physio, called The Office Athlete. So somebody invited us to speak at a conference, and there were like 12 people.
Yep.
And Ron Tacky was there. So Ron Tacky, who's an American speaker who's been speaking in Australia for 20 years by the time I met him, he said, you should be a speaker. And I said, what's a speaker? And he mentored me into the business after that. So
great.
A very circuitous route. I didn't plan it.
So some of us as health professionals, we might not want to be professional speakers, but we do a lot of presentations. What do you think are some of the things that we should be looking out to do when we're doing our presentations to make them a bit more effective?
Well, I think the greatest piece of advice Ron gave me was to have fun.
Yes.
He said, if I have fun, they'll have fun.
Yeah.
And you know, health is not that exciting a lot of the time.
But I've seen your presentations, they are. How do we do that?
Yeah, well, you know, I put a lot of humour into it, and I think the things that separate what I do from others is not the humour, because lots of people are funny, but it's the getting the people to do things. So I use a lot of speed, and I use a lot of group dynamics. If anybody's really interested in getting better, they need to study with Michael Grinder, and I believe you've interviewed him. So
I have.
Have a look at Tara's things out there on Michael Grinder, and I studied group dynamics for 15 years, every year doing different things with him. So there's process and there's content when we deliver. So the content has to be a given. You know, you have to know your stuff really well, and most health professionals do. What separates them is the process by which they deliver it.
Yes.
So you want to be thinking about things like fill it with stories. And Dale Carnegie, I forget the name of the book now, but anyway, in Dale Carnegie's book, he said you've got to make a point, tell a story that illustrates the point, and then show them how that story and that point are relevant to them.
Yeah.
So every scenario in your life becomes a story. You know, something horrible happens to me, I think, oh, this would be a good story one day. Or something good happens.
Spin.
Yeah. Something good happens, and I think, oh, this will be a good story one day. Or I see something happen to somebody else, and I think, oh, that'll be a good story too. A speaker's life is all about stories.
Yeah.
So you pick the story, and then find something that you can use the story to illustrate, and then make them get involved in some way. That's the second thing that separates me from others. So the first is, the big package is process, but within the process there's interaction. So I get people not to yell out stuff, because you don't say,
we see that all the time.
Who knows the answer to this? And you know, everybody sits there dead silent, and there's always one person that yells it out, and everybody else goes, oh yeah.
Thank God.
So don't do it, you know. Get them to turn to the person next to them and start bonding with the person next to them. So they can turn one side and then the other side. And just a 2-second thing where you say to somebody, quick, turn to the person next to you and do blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Now the quick thing.
And the speed that you say that makes them do it quicker?
Well, it's saying quick, it puts them under time pressure. Because if you just say, oh, turn to the person next to you and tell them about your life history, they all sit, you give them time to go, oh no, what am I going to say? I don't want to do that. Oh, this sucks. So don't do it. Just go quick, turn to the person next to you and tell them X, or tell them where you last had pain, or something to do with, when did you last floss your teeth? I don't know, whatever it's going to be. But tell them, quick, tell them. So you use the speed, that's another part of the process, or the process, if you're American watching this, that connects them. Because the real key is to connect with the audience. Yeah. It's you with them, and then to get them connected with each other. That's the real secret. So you can have any sort of content as long as you know it well, but if you can find a way to really connect with them, and you do that with caring, real caring. And I remember in the early days, I used to speak on health and wellness. So Ron used to say, stop being a missionary. Yes. And I'd go, I'm not being a missionary. But I was. I believed so passionately in what I was teaching them. I was shoving it down their throats going, you have to do this, you have to do this. And it took me years to realise that I had to give them a degustation plate. I had to present a plate with lots of little tasty morsels on them. I had to make them look good and sound exciting and be tasty, and then let them choose the thing that was right for them.
And how much of that information do we give them? I know, a lot of my students, and when I'm looking at planning a presentation, sometimes I think I might put a bit too much in there. How many of those little morsels should we be including?
Well, I don't know if it's any use to you guys, but I have a one page like this, and I have boxes down the side. And my first box is introduction. So I have 3 or 4 or 5 introduction activity stories. Like the latest one I'm using, which I haven't used for years, I'm kind of cycling back. I get everybody to cross their arms like this, and I say, which hand is on top? And then and they all look down because I don't know why they do it, but they all do it. And then I say, exactly reverse it. And I go to do this, and I stop here because they're all doing that. Because everybody thinks, oh yeah, I'll reverse it. And they go to reverse it, and as they're reversing, they think, oh, how do you do that? Oh, how does that work? And then they end up going like this and put both hands on top because they're having to do it. Or they go back to exactly the same thing and they think they've reversed it. So I use that as a ha, get them all engaged. And then I say, change is not as easy as we think. Or change is hard. Or I use some like story to launch on. So that's the introduction. Then there's, depending on the time I've got, 4 or 5 big chunks of categories of information. And then I have a finish. So you've always got to have a finish, some kind of fun thing that they can do together, even if it's turn to the person next to you and tell them 3 things you've learned that you're going to do differently from now on. Yeah. And that's, if nothing else, that cements in things they've learned, and it makes them do something instead of sitting there being a vegetable while you've talked for an hour. And with the pieces in between, the difference between a keynote and training is like an iceberg. A keynote being a training session you'd be doing for an hour. Are we talking an hour with people using?
Usually about an hour.
Okay. So the hour presentation is the tip of the iceberg, and the training for days or 2 days or a whole day is the bottom part of the iceberg, where there's buckets of information and you've got time to go through it and blah, blah, blah. So to do a keynote an hour, you really have to have all the knowledge that's in the bottom half of the iceberg, but you have to find a way to tell stories that pack in a bucket load of that knowledge. So we might be telling a story that touches their hearts, that indicates how important it is. We'd tell a story about Frank and Shirley. I'm putting this off the top of my head, okay, so it's not going to be a great story. But Frank and Shirley were a happily married couple. They were devoted to each other. And one day, Frank, who was obese and didn't listen to his wife and didn't ever exercise and lived on chicken nuggets and never was happy and read every sad thing he could ever find and lived in misery. Frank dies, surprise, surprise. And, Shirley's whole life crumbles and all his children live unhappily ever after, following the habits of their father. Yep. So you tell them a story
that they can connect with.
Yes. And within that story are all the messages you wanted. So you don't always have to go, and the message is...
so they can get the message themselves.
Yes.
You don't have to be explicit.
And you might just finish it off and saying, if only Frank had just done one thing. If he just stopped eating chicken nuggets. Or if only Frank had relaxed for half an hour every month. Or if only Frank had done something. So you get all that, there are all the other things going on, but you can pick out that just do one thing. Just one thing. You don't have to transform your whole life. Just do one thing. And that comes from the story of Frank and Shirley, whatever her name was.
So tell me, in your presentations, they're just so much fun. how do we do that as a health professional? When you're a physio, did you make it as fun or?
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
I used to always make it fun for my patients.
Yeah, great.
They would
learn
make
better.
it for fun for other patients. And, you know, like other people's patients would give me presents and they would make me baskets, you know. They'd go from the rehab centre where I was, somebody else was treating them, they'd go to OT and they'd make a basket and give it to me, which didn't make me that popular, you know, with the physios. But because I used to make everything fun.
Yeah.
And I used to teach them how to do it. Like I worked in a rehab centre and I would teach them all how to do their exercises, and I'd be in another room and I could hear the squeaking of one of the machines and it wasn't right, and I'd go, I know you're not doing it right. And you'd hear this, she knows everything. You know, something like that. So I did make it fun as a physio.
Yeah.
And if you're not really a fun person as a health professional, well, learn to be.
Yeah, great.
Pretty much learn to be. Yeah. Laugh, ask questions, look up jokes, find stories, something.
And one thing that you do brilliantly is you use a lot of props to illustrate your points and, you know, you make up new words and things like that. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how we could use that in our presentation?
Well, I call them symbols. I started off calling them props, but you know, props make you think of propeller head things.
Yeah, or proposals.
Yeah, something like that. So symbols to me, like people have attention spans of gnats on amphetamine, so they can talk. Like, you know, if you watch this video without the sound on, you would see me going, whoa, because it's more effective than just, and so let's use symbols.
Yeah.
Because when we use symbols, people really remember what the symbol says. And by now, people listening to this are thinking, I really don't care what she's saying. So symbols are like the iceberg. You know, they represent a concept. So I talk about Wally the woeful wabbit, who is the pessimist, and Sparky the baby kangaroo, who's the optimist. And I have kangaroo ears, which I would have bought today. Sorry, I forgot about that. And I have, like a couple of Disney characters that I'm not allowed to mention, but those sorts of things. So, you know, silly headbands. And people remember them for years.
And your little fun wand.
And I have a magic wand that goes bring, and I talk about being a fun fairy, you know, and I bring out and people go nutso over the wand, and they want one for work, they want one for their kids. So what you've done is package the message around the wand, so when they take the wand home and people go, oh cool, where'd you get that? They remember the story.
The message. Great.
And then they use the wand to bust their stress or manage their mood or create a change in the group dynamics or run the staff meeting better. So all of that I didn't have to tell them that, they just use it. So you're giving people concepts and a symbol of the concept and then allowing them the freedom to use it.
Amanda Gore, you're an inspiration. Thank you so much for speaking with us today.
Thanks for having me.
So Amanda Gore is testament that as health professionals we can be fantastic presenters and fantastic speakers. Amanda, thank you so much for speaking with us today.
You're welcome, Tara. Thanks for having me. Good luck.